don't eat without a supply chain. Okay, well, that's dramatic. So what is the supply chain? Think of a chain itself. Like a chain that holds up a classic swing you see on a playground. Each link in the chain loops around the next link, which holds up the swing together. If there is a break in the chain, then there's a problem. Now imagine that each chain link is one of the stops a product has to take before it gets to its next destination and then finally to us. That's the supply chain. Here's an example of a supply chain catching the skipjack tuna off the northeast coast of Australia. The caught tuna is sent to Thailand to be canned. Once canned, the tuna is loaded onto a ship and delivered to the port of Sydney in Australia. That's then loaded onto a truck to be delivered to my family's local market, and my humans pick up the canned fishies and deliver it to me. Each link in this chain has to happen for me to get my canned fishies. If there is a disruption or a break in this chain, then it could delay, or even worse, completely stop me from getting my fishies. This goes for any product we can think of. There is a supply chain with everything. It's not like we can just have products spontaneously appear in front of us whenever we want it. That didn't involve someone else producing it and delivering it to us. So we better understand the importance of supply chains, because when disruptions happen, we can understand the possible outcomes and can make the best possible decisions for us and our family. So let's head to the lab. Whoops. In 2020, the world was thrown into chaos when it was realized that COVID-19 virus was spreading from country to country. National borders were locked and people were advised to stay inside. Fearing exposure to the virus, many in the community were too scared to go out at all. Lockdown orders were introduced in many countries, which not only impacted manufacturing, but also deliveries of goods and materials. In the United States, there were people staying home that now meant they had no way of generating an income. So the government said, "Stay inside, don't go out to work. Don't worry about your bills, we'll give you money." This extra money was given through a program that was known as the CARES Act. I know, guys, you are probably thinking, "Kitten, wait, what on earth does this CARES Act have to do with the supply chains? I don't get it." I know, I'm getting there. By the end of 2021, there were cities and towns across the country where stores had a lot less stuff on the shelves. This is because the supply chain of almost every product had been disrupted. I'll explain some reasons why. First, I want to clarify that the CARES Act was made up of many components. These all had a large effect on the spending habits of some individuals, but for the purpose of time, I will just go over the effects of the unemployment benefits portion of the CARES Act. Keep in mind that unemployment benefits likely had a minor impact to economic activity compared to the other parts of the program, such as PPP loans. Prior to the CARES Act being introduced, unemployment benefits were $378 per week. Introducing the CARES Act increased unemployment by $600 per week, not including the possibility of receiving $1,200 per adult and $500 per child under 17. But were there many people that took up these unemployment benefits? Well, if we look at the data, there had never been anywhere close to the amount of government-paid unemployment benefits when compared to the year 2020 onwards. Between 1959 and 2019, the government paid approximately $1.6 trillion in unemployment benefits in total. But in the single year of 2020, government paid benefits were $6.4 trillion. Also, don't forget where governments get money to pay for things: taxes, which is you. But anyway, even if we were to adjust this figure for inflation, the amount was still record-breaking. Now we may be able to justify this by arguing that there has never been a pandemic like this before. People couldn't possibly work in this level of risk. Yeah, I'm not here to discuss whether this decision was right or wrong. I'm sticking to the supply chain only. But what does giving people money who don't have a job have to do with the supply chain? There are two main points I see with this. The first is that residents have more money to spend on personal items, which could be anything from electronics to clothing, making investments, buying a house or a new car, anything you would want to buy with some extra money you have. This will increase the demand for this stuff, so producers will have lots of orders to meet these demands. And because most of the products are produced outside of the United States, products from overseas are being shipped in great numbers. So we have a lot of ships coming with the people's stuff, and measures were being discovered to allow more people to get out of lockdown and back to work. But some people had to make a choice. Being unemployed and receiving benefits meant that individuals were receiving about $50,000 per year from the CARES Act alone. So what happened? Individuals in many industries were being paid less than the unemployment benefits they would otherwise receive while a virus hanging around. Many decided they didn't want to work anymore, just like we said before. See? These benefits caused Americans to have money in their bank accounts to levels that they had never had before. See? With the data suggesting that this money went to be spent on stuff people wanted. You see?
Wait, Kitten, hang on. Their savings probably went up because their pay went up. It just can't be because of the CARES Act.
Yes, very observant. I'm impressed. However, the trend in earnings wasn't enough to change savings accounts by the amount it did. This suggests that the CARES Act was largely the contributor. Interesting side note though. Many industries saw a reduction in the numbers of workers during this time, but the transport and warehouse industry stayed on as a whole. Looking at it a bit closer, we can see this number was held up by warehousing and other transportation sectors, other transportation likely to be couriers. But the amount of truckers did drop. That's important to note for later. Although some employees would have been forced into unemployment because their employer downsized during this lockdown period, we can safely assume that there were some who preferred not working compared to working. This ultimately led to labour shortages. But we now know from the data that warehousing numbers grew by a decent level, which suggests that demand skyrocketed during the period of lockdowns. I want to be clear though, I'm not saying that decisions made during this time were right or wrong. We're just observing the effects. So the scenario is, in 2020, individuals have more money available to spend on items being delivered directly to their home, which may have otherwise been spent on something like travel. This means more orders, which means we need more ships, trains, and trucks. At the same time, factories around the world have had manufacturing and warehouses interrupted by the local lockdowns. So what did this lead to? Ships had been stuck holding their cargo because of the larger number wanting to dock and unload at California. Why California? It's the closest dock to China. China makes a lot of the stuff we want. Policy decisions were made to ease this congestion, and they said, we are going to keep the ports open 24/7 to ease congestion. Although the government declared these decisions a success, we are going to go through why policies, although intended for good, cause some significant problems for the supply chain. The policy proposed that ports would be opened 24 hours, 7 days a week to ease congestion sounds at first like it would work, but the issue wasn't the workers at the port not working enough to unload ships. It was that there weren't enough trucks to take the containers from the port and allow more space for the larger number of incoming containers. California's law aimed to eliminate all trucks that don't meet emission standards by 2026 was underway during this period. So in 2021, the opening of the ports for 24 hours did not change the truck shortage. It just led to the remaining truckers and port workers feeling overworked. Thankfully, the regulations to limit the amount of containers that can be stacked had temporarily eased, but there was still a record number of ships waiting off port ready to dock, and the port was full of containers. Another proposed policy was the Container Access Dwell Act. which imposed fines on ships sitting at the dock for more than a certain amount of days. This was introduced to ease congestion, but I can guarantee that a ship does not want to be at a dock for longer than it has to. It costs the ship tens of thousands of dollars a day to hold each delivery and operate the ship itself. They are desperate to unload and get back to their home port. The fee to ship cargo is already established prior to the ships leaving. The longer the ship takes, the more they spend in fuel, wages, and resources every day while they are being held up. So what shippers did to avoid the added cost of the new levy? They just moved their ships to wait further out from the port, which does not at all ease the problem of delays in unloading containers from ships. The moral of the story here is we rely on others to get the stuff we need, but if something in that chain is interrupted, the stuff we want becomes more expensive or it doesn't arrive at all. The more links in the chain or supply complexity to get from supplier to customer, generally speaking, the more expensive the products will be for us to buy. And remember, when rules are introduced, don't assume the outcome by what the rule is called, but think through the impact of those rules, just like we did with the supply chain. Those who claim to have all the answers 100% of the time don't have all the answers. One single individual person cannot solve the problems of the world. We need to work together and discuss opposing views so we can get the best outcomes. There are going to be both good and bad impacts, because as Thomas Sowell teaches us, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. So it means we should keep cool, stay humble, and be kind to all, even behind closed doors.